Hello everyone. For my final research project, I want to discuss the Battle of Bunker Hill and its significance on the rest of the Revolution. The Battle of Bunker Hill is known as the first formal battle of the Revolution. But what I really want to show through this presentation is how this specific battle impacted the rest of the Revolution and really set the stage for the Revolution. The Battle of Bunker Hill was fought on June 17, 1775. It's also called the Battle of Breed's Hill for the actual site of the fighting, which took place on Breed's Hill rather than Bunker Hill, but I'll get to that a little later. Now on June 16, 1775, the day prior to battle, the colonists learned that the British were planning to send troops from Boston to occupy the hills surrounding the city. About 1,000 colonial militiamen under Colonel William Prescott built barricades on top of Breed's Hill, overlooking Boston and located on the Charleston Peninsula. Although the initial plan was to use Bunker Hill, the dark of the night, along with some issues with the drawings of the map, landed the colonists on Breed's Hill instead. I have a few different versions of the map that include various sketches from Henry Dearborn, Samuel Swett, to name a few, that I'll post in my PowerPoint as well. But here, I have this map from the Old Dominion Military Society that shows just how close it actually was. See, right here, you have Bunker Hill, where it was intended for them to be. And then right here, you see how close Breed's Hill was. Now see, this area right here is where they actually wanted to block off and build their barricades. But instead, they actually did it here, adjacent to Breed's Hill, rather than adjacent to Bunker Hill. So you can see where the confusion came in. Now on June 17th, the day of the battle, about 2,200 British forces under the command of General William Howe and General Robert Pigot landed on the Charleston Peninsula and then marched to Breed's Hill. The colonists, however, were well protected behind the barriers they had made using clay, stone, and various other matters of the earth. The colonists successfully defended themselves during 2 of the 3 British advances. As the British advanced in columns against the Americans, General Prescott, in an effort to conserve the Americans' limited supply of ammunition, reportedly told his men, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." This is where that famous statement came from, was this battle. Now when the Redcoats were within several dozen yards, the Americans let loose with a lethal amount of musket fire, throwing the British into retreat. After reforming their lines, the British attacked the second time, with pretty much the same result as the first. They ended up retreating. Now Prescott's men were now low on ammunition, and when the Redcoats went up the hill for a third time, they engaged the Americans in hand-to-hand combat. The outnumbered Americans were forced to retreat. However, by the end of the battle, the Patriots' gunfire had cut down the British to around 1,000 troops, with more than 200 killed and more than 800 wounded. More than 100 Americans perished, while more than 300 others were wounded. The British claimed victory, technically, but the great number of casualties gave the colonists encouragement to continue fighting for their cause. For the British, the high price of victory at the battle made them realize that the war with the colonies would be long, tough, and costly. The battle signified a confidence for the colonists that they could actually battle with the British, which can be interpreted as a significant turning point for the colonists in the Revolution, specifically this confidence that they were able to succeed against the British. Now, one of the most significant losses in the battle for the colonists was the death of General Joseph Warren. During the battle, he fought behind the barricades until the Patriots exhausted their ammunition, which was right before the third attack that the British were successful with. He stayed there to give the militia time to escape while the British made their final assault. After the battle, there was a lot of confusion about what happened to Joseph Warren. Some argued that he survived the battle and somehow escaped, while others thought he may have been killed in the retreat. The details of the events of Bunker Hill remained a mystery until a year later, when Paul Revere helped identify Warren's body by the false teeth that Revere had actually made for Warren years earlier. Now, some historical records, such as the information discussed on the article located at history.com, state that a British officer recognized him while he was waiting at Breed's Hill to give the militia time to escape and shot him in the head. The British then stripped his body and stabbed it beyond recognition, then threw him into a shallow grave with another patriot killed in the battle. However, the analysis of his body, discussed in the Journal of Neurosurgery, helped to sift through the differing tales of Warren's death and unveil the truth about what occurred that day. The smaller bullet wound in the skull suggested that he was not shot while retreating with the rest of the soldiers, but rather shot at point-blank range. Therefore, contrary to rumors that circulated at the time about him possibly being killed during retreat or that he successfully got away, Dr. Warren most likely was killed instantly at the Battle of Bunker Hill while heroically facing his enemy. Now, regarding Joseph Warren, military historian Ethan Rafuse wrote, "No man, with the possible exception of Samuel Adams, did so much to bring about the rise of a movement powerful enough to lead the people of Massachusetts to revolution." Joseph Warren was a significant figure of this time period, so much so that loyalist Peter Oliver in 1782 said that, had Warren lived, George Washington would have been in obscurity. That's a strong statement, and Warren is someone that's often overlooked when discussing the founding fathers and people that were significant during this revolutionary time. Joseph Warren's heroic actions are just another example of the significance this battle had on the rest of the revolution and how far the colonists were willing to go to secure their freedom. Now, when thinking of the Revolutionary War, many different things come to mind for most people. But usually the Battle of Bunker Hill, despite being the first formal battle of this war, is not one of those things. Tony Horwitz said it best in Smithsonian Magazine when he wrote that the nation's knowledge of the Battle of Bunker Hill is nonsense. Tony Horwitz also writes about Nathaniel Philbrick, who is an author drawn to iconic and misunderstood episodes in American history, and how Philbrick was so drawn to the Battle of Bunker Hill because the nation's knowledge on the subject seems so non-existent. In Philbrick's book, Bunker Hill, he revisits the beginnings of the American Revolution, a subject freighted with more myth, pride, and politics than any other in our national narrative, and writes with the hopes of showing the significance and importance of this battle. Philbrick says, Johnny Tremaine, Paul Revere's ride, today's Tea Partiers, you have to tune all that out to get to the real story. He believed that the Bunker Hill was the real story. Before the Battle of Bunker Hill, Philbrick discusses how the colonists wanted the liberties of British subjects, not American independence. However, that began to change once blood was shed, which is why the Battle of Bunker Hill was so pivotal. The chaotic fighting at Lexington and Concord in April of 1775 left the British holed up in Boston and hostile colonists occupying the city's surrounds. They were surrounding the British. But it remained unclear whether the ill-equipped colonists were willing or able to engage the British Army in an actual battle. Leaders on both sides also thought that the conflict might be able to be settled without a full-scale war. But the Battle of Bunker Hill changed that. The battle gave the colonists enough confidence and the British enough fear of defeat to enter into a full-fledged war. Now, the final point I'd like to share is in regards to the Bunker Hill Monument, Lodge, and Museum. This monument is one of the very few monuments that was made to represent a battle that was actually lost. The cornerstone of the Bunker Hill Monument was laid in 1825 by Revolutionary Marquis de Lafayette on the 50th anniversary of the battle. This monument is located in Charleston, Massachusetts, along the Freedom Trail. The monument also has a Bunker Hill Lodge located right next to it, and the Bunker Hill Museum located across the street that displays murals and even artifacts from the battle itself, which actually include a Masonic apron belonging to Revolutionary leader Dr. Joseph Warren, who was killed in this battle, as I discussed before. Now, I believe the fact that a battle was lost but still signified a monument and later a museum shows just how important this battle was, but it's still often overlooked. Perhaps many just see the Battle of Bunker Hill as the first formal battle of the Revolutionary War, but my hope is that the significance of this battle is shown through my research and this presentation. I really would like people to see it as more than just the first formal battle of the Revolutionary War, and see how this battle itself actually shaped the colonists' attitude towards the idea of the Revolutionary War. It gave them the confidence they needed to pursue their freedom against Great Britain. I will also post a PowerPoint that has some images of those maps I mentioned previously, and also has some images of the Bunker Hill Monument, the lodge, and the museum. I look forward to your comments, and please make sure you take a look at the PowerPoint also. Thank you.